Well, before I get started, I want to talk about today was the first day of the whole Teacher Electicon conference. And if you have not joined and you need professional development, I'm going to tell y'all this thing is awesome. And I mean awesome. Tomorrow at I think 2 o'clock, I will be doing a interview with them. So hopefully we I can share that with y'all on Facebook. But this should be a lot of fun. Well, today I have an amazing new guest. It's not that all of my guests aren't amazing, but John is, well, he's my neighbor here on the Big Island. And we were talking, and I found out what he did. And, I like for young people to actually see people doing the work in STEM that they may be interested in. John is 34 years old. He's from Washington State, but he's now here on the Big Island. He is an electrical engineer, and he went to BYU, Brigham Young, but you went to Brigham Young on the mainland, right? You didn't go
Yes,
to Brigham Young here.
correct.
Okay. And he works in the power industry. So, John, would you say hello to our guest and introduce yourself, please?
Sure. My name's John Campbell. It's really nice to talk with you all. I'm really excited about this. I currently work as so I'm a registered professional engineer in the power industry, and I work on a number of different things. I do studies for the power grid, arc flash, power system studies. I do some protective relaying, which is really exciting. And I also do some electrical design and put together drawing packages for construction of new buildings.
Oh, okay. So you got a whole lot of things going on there.
Yeah.
Well, John, before we get started into what you're doing now, tell my audience a little bit about your journey. How did you become an electrical engineer?
Yeah, all right. My journey started when I was really little. Uh, I've kind of always been around electrical engineering. My father worked at a tech startup when I was really young, and so I'd
Hmm.
often go to work with him in the evenings after he would go to school, and so he would kind of babysit me at work, and I would just kind of wander around and look at all of the. I mean, I would when he was busy, I would go and look at all of the soldering irons and all of the circuit boards and all of the electrical components, and I just got really fascinated um, by all of that stuff. And I was old enough to be kind of solo on those excursions through the building, and it was just really fascinating to me to see how all of all of those components work together to build really cool things that helped farmers. Actually, it was uh, for water content in the soil and for measuring solar strength, and so these really cool devices to help people live better lives, and that inspired me to start taking apart my parents' VCR or rotary phones because I wanted to know how they worked. I wanted to know what was inside, what made them function to help me communicate with people that I couldn't see, and just really understand the world that I lived in, and the devices that I used and that benefited my life. And
Hmm. Hmm.
and so I always had a desire to learn about electrical engineering. And so immediately after high school, I hopped into a technical institute that taught me about electronics, how to troubleshoot them, how to solder, how to uh, how to work with electrical components and what they were and how they functioned from a high level. And that's really from there I took a job as an electrical test technician and that just kind of inspired me ever since.
And that was one of the things I didn't ask you when we were talking the other day. Did you do anything before you went to college in the field that made you interested? And obviously now I know. So,
And
but
one thing that I remember is I actually took a robotics class my senior year of high school. I'd actually forgotten about that until now, but yeah, I took a robotics class and we learned how to do some programming. We learned how to work with servos, and it was just wonderful. I had a really great time in that class.
mhm, mhm. Now, when you went to college, did you start out at Brigham Young or did you start somewhere else?
Yeah, I started out at Brigham Young University in Provo and had my entire collegiate career there.
Now, how was it being on campus, being an engineering student, and trying to balance college and social life? Because a lot of our students think you go to school to be an engineer or you go to school for a STEM degree, you are just a nerd. You don't do anything else. You have no life.
it's it was tough. It was definitely a lot of hard work. There were a lot of late nights at the lab. There was a lot of weekends where I was focused solely on homework, and I really had to make it my job. I heard some really good advice from some people that I tried to take, and that was make college your job. So I tried to get on campus by 7:30, 8 a.m., and I just worked as hard as I could until about 5 or 6. And by doing that, that allowed me to have a lot of weekends and a lot of evenings free to socialize. And every once in a while, I had the time in my schedule to do some extracurriculars like some service groups, or I even played percussion in a Celtic band, or did I was part of the folk dance troupe, and we did a performance for called Christmas Around the World, which was a great experience. So I would say that it is a lot of hard work, and it's important to know that going in, but
Yeah.
it is possible to balance and have a good social life and have friends, and if you're able to maintain some discipline.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, and that's important because, when I talk to a lot of my young people, and this year I've had quite a few college students who were talking about that work-life balance. And, because you've got to be able to get out there, and that's one of the ways you get to know other people who are going to be instrumental in your
Mm,
career or in your life later on. Because I
yeah,
mean, I've been out of college for a short period of time myself,
yeah.
and I still have high school and college people that I continue to communicate with and keep up with, and that's very, very important. Now, while you were in school,
Hmm.
what were some of your, I mean, everybody's got to take English, math, history, all of those courses, but what were some of the courses you found to be very interesting?
Oh, I loved physics. I I loved physics. It I have a craving to know how this universe functions.
Mhm.
I want to know. I love to learn. I try to pursue truth and understanding, and so physics was just beautiful to me. It's
Mhm.
elegant and wonderful, and um, I also loved computer programming. Even though I kind of struggled with it, it taught me how to think logically, and it taught me patience as I had to debug my code, as I had to. It taught Programming taught me a lot about myself, actually, which was a very interesting thing that I wasn't expecting. But I loved computer programming, and the logical discipline that it taught me to think through a problem towards a beautiful solution. Um, Oh man, there. Yeah, I would have to say that those two were the most. Those were the classes that I loved the most.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Now, this is one of the things that, we're in this time of social distancing and
Mhm.
everything, but a lot of young people don't understand being in the STEM careers, you a lot of time work in groups or work in teams. Can you give me some insight on to how did some of that go for you when you first started?
Yeah. So I work for a company where our teams are actually distributed
Mm,
all across the country, and so I learned how to work in teams, but I also learned how to work with distributed teams. And so actually, when COVID hit and we had to start working from home, it wasn't
yep.
that much of a difference. But working in teams is is a really powerful skill. The ability to work with people and understand what people are trying to say, asking questions, phone calls, emails, really communication and developing good communication skills and being genuine and being uh, helping people realize that you have their best interest at heart too. It's
Yeah.
working. So what's interesting right now is that I work with architects and civil engineers and
Hmm.
structural engineers and communications engineers and mechanical engineers, and we all work together on this one project to construct a new building. um, and it could be a very complex building. And what I've discovered is working with teams is that the architect, they really care about architecture, and the civil engineer really cares about civil engineering. And as an electrical engineer, sometimes I have to remember that it's easy to forget how important other disciplines are. And
Yeah.
so that communication is really critical to always be open and always be merciful and always be kind.
Hmm.
And because people are people and we're all humans, and so sometimes we forget things, and sometimes a deadline comes up, and then the mechanical engineer's like, oh, I forgot a fan, I'm sorry. And then you have a choice. You can either get mad and upset that causes a big ripple and you have to
Yeah.
change your design and your panel schedules, or you can be like, hey, it's all right, this is the nature of design, this is the nature of working in teams, and just being very forgiving and flexible and very willing to work with everyone at and realize that everyone's human and everyone's trying to do the best they can.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's got to be important because when we talk about a lot of STEM fields, we virtually when we talk about, almost any field now, people have to work together.
Yes.
It's no longer, well, stay in your lane, only do your job. When you're working in these connected fields, you're going to have to say, okay, what are we going to do?
Mm-hmm.
It's like being a teacher. I'm a science,
Mm-hmm.
well, was a science teacher. Now I'm going to be a STEM teacher. I can't say, well, my seventh grade class, I only have to worry about them. We have to worry about all the seventh graders or all the, high school biology kids or whatever. So I understand what you're getting at because, well, in your profession, you can easily have countless changes
Yeah.
in something you're developing
Yeah.
over the course of time because it's not like you go in today, you do this one thing and it's done. You're
Mm-hmm.
working on projects over time.
Yep.
Now, before, I want to get into this too deep.
Mm-hmm.
We had a conversation yesterday
Yeah.
about um, families and parents being a integral part of their kids being in STEM. Uh, what do you think about that? I know you talked about, your father and taking you to work and stuff like that earlier, but what information or, you know, courtesy would you give some of our families out there who are wanting to have their kids in STEM?
Yeah, I had I had really great parents. I have really great parents. They're still
I'm like,
they're still alive. um, and they were very involved in my education,
yeah.
and I'm very I will forever be grateful for that. My mother would read to me almost every night, and read to me and my siblings, and and she was very instrumental in my classical education of,
Hmm.
and that really led me to STEM, because that opened my mind up to so many different worlds, and imagination, and the idea of creation, uh, and they always encouraged my interests. So when I started showing interests in electrical engineering, in electrical things, they actually, either for one of my birthdays or for Christmas, they scrounged together some money to buy me one of those 101 electrical kits that had the electrical components where you could like move the spring, insert the lead of a resistor, move the other spring, insert the lead of the resistor, create simple circuits, um, and work with projects on me like that. And my parents were involved in helping me explore and discover with me
Hmm.
things about STEM, and have conversations with me. Like my whenever I would go over to my dad's bookcase with all of his old electrical engineering books in there, and I'd pull one down and start flipping through it, he would just talk with me, and ask me what I was interested about, and encourage me, and answer my questions.
Hmm. Hmm. And you know, that is important. Like right now, I mentioned I was talked about the whole teacher electicon conference that I'm in, and one of the sessions that we set in today, based on everything that's going on, you know, is looking at what parents can do with their kids that are not, that isn't expensive when
Hmm.
it comes to STEM activities. And that's always been a big thing, that STEM was expensive. You had to buy the biggest and the brightest. You had to have robots. You had to have all of these things.
Yeah,
But in your case and in my case, we just worked on things around the house, like you worked on the VCR, the toaster, and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah.
Now,
Or
go
the
ahead.
or like we were talking about yesterday, the light bulb. If the light bulb blew, that could be a teaching opportunity, and my dad would take me to the electrical panel and be like, here's a circuit breaker. Here's how this connects to the transformers outside on the distribution network, and help me understand how that all connected. And we were talking, and you're right, it doesn't need to be expensive, because STEM is everywhere. It's all around us. It's
Yeah.
like, even even though I'm 34 years old, uh, I still think popsicle sticks and Elmer's glue, or to build bridges, or marshmallows and toothpicks to build
Yep.
structures, is a beautiful, beautiful thing you could do with kids. It's very inexpensive and tasty
Hmm.
afterwards.
Oh yeah. Valine said hers. She goes, mine was the vacuum cleaner. So obviously she must have took the vacuum cleaner apart and fixed it, or got in trouble for tearing it apart. That's
Yeah.
okay. She'll let me know later.
Yep.
But I mean, that's the thing. We're in a society where when something electrical breaks, a TV, well, some people still have VCRs, DVD players, toasters, washing machines, dryers, instead of getting them repaired, like I get mine repaired, we just buy another one because it's so cheap.
Yeah.
And in some cases, you can't find anyone to really repair a television.
Yeah.
Like back in the day. We had those, I call them big back TVs. We don't have those anymore. Everything is flat and can hang on the wall.
Yep.
But, but yet and still, a lot of people don't really understand and know what electricity is and what it does for them. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are just joining us, I am interviewing Mr. John Campbell, an electrical engineer here in Hilo, Hawaii, and I am just totally excited about having him on the show. And if you're just joining us, share this video with your friends so they can also see this because kids, well, everybody needs to see somebody in the business because when we talk about engineering, you have a young man or a young lady say, "Oh, I want to be an engineer." Well, what type of engineer do you want to be? And this is a type of engineer that they could really want to be, which is an electrical engineer. Um, John, we had a discussion yesterday.
Yeah.
Uh, because of your mission work, you went to Cape Verde, Africa,
Yes.
on mission work, and we were talking about your perception there when you were doing your missionary work of the importance of electricity. Can you expound on that for me a little bit?
Yeah. Um, so Cape Verde, Africa, is located a couple hundred miles off the coast of Senegal, in between the Brazil and the African coast, and
Mm-hmm.
and kind of south of the Canaries and the Azores, just to let people know, or the Canaries, excuse me, just to let people know where it's at. But it's a developing nation, and I was there about 10 years ago, and it was it's a developing nation. It was a developing nation, and it changed my life forever. It was in multiple ways, and I love the people there, and and I think about them all the time. But uh, in terms of electricity, sometimes in some of the major cities, sometimes they would experience generator problems, and there would be rolling blackouts across the city, and you'd only get about an hour of electricity per day as they would cycle through the different districts to try and give them
Mm-hmm.
some electricity. And that was the first time that I had ever really experienced life without significant electricity. And sometimes in certain parts of the island, generators would shut off at about 8 p.m., and you'd have to carry candles with you. Um, and that experience of not having electricity 24/7 really opened my eyes to just how beautiful electricity really is in helping people have a good quality of life. Just having lights at night, or a fan at night when it's really hot, or refrigeration.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
Not be able to store food because you'd only be able to turn your refrigerator on for about an hour, and just life without electricity can be very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And it really opened my eyes to how blessed we are to have public utilities that are constant and not intermittent.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're so right because I mean, it for us it's a necessity. For some people it's a luxury, but we've become so used to it
Hmm.
in so many places, so many countries, so many cities. I mean, even here on the Big Island, you remember we just had the Hurricane Douglas that came through yesterday.
Yeah.
And that was the biggest fear is what if we lose power? We were lucky, thank goodness that it didn't, we took no direct hits on any of the islands, but we did get a lot of wind.
Mm.
That us being without power,
Yeah.
how is that going to affect us? Because we're on an island. We can't just have, TXU come up from Houston to Dallas to help us out. Although there were some people from Hawaii Electric that went over to one of the other islands to be prepared.
Hmm.
But our preparation here is totally different.
Yeah.
But and being here, one of the things that I noticed is how different light is used, how different electricity is used. I
Mm.
don't know if you've ever driven over Saddle Road at night.
Yes, I have.
Okay. For those of you who don't know, Saddle Road is our major highway here on the Big Island. And because of the observatory, it has no street lights.
Hmm.
So you're driving on a major highway with no street lights. And the one and only time I did it, it terrified me to death.
Yeah.
And I have never done it again. I've never driven on Saddle Road again, period. I will drive the long way around the island, which takes you an extra hour to get to Kona, then
Mm.
drive over Saddle Road, which takes you an hour less.
Hmm.
But when you first moved here,
Mm.
thinking of how the island is and what it stands for and what it does, how do you vision electricity here on the island or the use of electricity here on the island?
Mm. That's a really good question. I think electricity is appreciated here much more than any other place I've ever lived. I think the people at the public utilities take their jobs very seriously and do a really good job. And because of all of the natural disasters that can occur here, you know, some of the hurricanes coming through. I know that Iselle back in the day, lots of trees fell down. There were lots of places without power, and something just as simple as ice. You know, you never really
Yeah.
think of it, but what people really needed was ice in affected areas, and ice is, you know, you use electricity to run refrigeration to produce ice, and so they take electricity very seriously out here, and that's what I noticed, and I they do a really good job keeping the lights on, and whenever major events occur, to try and redirect power to affected areas, because
Hmm.
on an island resources can be limited and they can be
Hmm.
scarce, and electricity is a major, it's a major factor in helping people get through. Because I mean, if electricity goes down, communications can go down. It like backup generators can eventually run out of fuel.
Hmm.
Communications can go down. Refrigeration can go down. I mean, just think about hospitals, or just even trying to call people, or or the food in your refrigerator, or pulling money out of an ATM.
Oh, yeah.
I know that during major disasters, if you can't get access to money through an ATM because electricity is down, even if you might have financial resources, if you can't get access to them, it's as if you don't have any. and so and so that's really what was fascinating to me, was just how seriously they take their utilities, because people here know what it's like to be without them
Yeah, yeah.
during disasters.
And I noticed when we were preparing for Douglas, um, a lot of people were purchasing ice.
Mm.
A lot of people probably already had coolers because they've lived here forever, but
Hmm.
a lot were purchasing ice. As you know, I did get a 3 gallon water container to make sure I had water, just in case. But I didn't have flashlights, so I made sure I purchased flashlight. Those kind of things I just really wouldn't think about being here.
Right.
Uh, Now, alternative energy sources.
Mm.
What's your view on that? Being here on an island, being in the power industry, being an electrical engineer.
Mm.
Uh, We have a lot of solar panels at
Hmm.
different places here.
Hmm.
So let me get your view on that.
Oh, that's that's a bit of a hot button issue out here.
Uh-oh. Why? I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a bit of a hot button issue out here. My having been in this industry for a little over 7 years, um, I know what my personal preferences are, but those I do need to preface that these definitely change based upon locations
Yes, yes.
and situations. In terms of, so there's a very interesting debate uh, about renewables and about bulk power generation. And
Hmm.
I do want to preface that I'm not I don't want to claim to be an expert,
Yeah.
but I can give you some interesting thoughts about it. So let's talk about bulk power generation.
Hmm.
Bulk power generation is is your hydroelectric facilities, it's
Yes,
your nuclear facilities, it's your coal and natural gas facilities,
yes,
and those are your bulk power generation. And the reason we need to talk about that is because we need to talk about inertia. We need to talk about just how massive these generators
yes,
actually are. If you walk into a hydroelectric facility, those generators are the size of a medium sized house, like a
yeah, they
multi
are.
story house. They're huge. And the shafts on those things are several tons of steel. And so they rotate, and that rotation has energy inside of it. And so what happens is that if there is an event on the power grid, if there is an issue, there's a fault, there's somebody knocks over a power pole or
Yeah,
whatever, there's this huge transient that occurs. That massive shaft allows the bulk power grid to ride through that event
yes,
because they can pull energy. There's energy that can be pulled out of that rotation of that shaft, and so bulk power generation can ride through events really easily, or
yeah,
I should say much easier. But when we start getting into solar panels and wind turbines and things of that nature, there, yes, there are rotating shafts in wind turbines, but they're very
yes,
small in comparison. And there's no rotating machinery in solar panels.
right.
And so what happens is that with renewables, you could consider them maybe a little bit more fragile, a little bit more brittle,
Hmm.
a little bit more. It's hard to use words to describe this. It's harder for them to ride through large events because they don't have that rotating energy to pull from.
Yeah. And see, I find those necessary. I
Hmm.
mean, they're great. A lot of companies are selling them,
Hmm.
but being here and traveling the islands, there are areas that right now aren't able to get that bulk energy.
Right.
So to me, the solar power um, is an alternative
Hmm.
to being able to get that until
Yeah.
that is able because when you talk about living up in Volcano, I
Yeah.
have several friends who live up there and they're building container homes and they're living their lives right now through the utilization of propane
Hmm.
and generators. Um, they don't have the ability to get the bulk power
Right.
yet.
Right.
But the solar, because we are on an island and it's sunny much of the time, they're able to utilize that until hopefully that gets out to where they are.
Yeah.
And so,
And you actually bring up a really good point. So we would consider that a microgrid. And
okay,
yeah, and so microgrid technology can be applied there, and that's you're 100% right. Like microgrid technology is really exciting, And for example, the example that you gave is a perfect thing to talk about in terms of microgrid, because and multiple distributed sources of energy, having that backup generator, having solar panels that power a battery bank, and even throwing on a wind turbine to power the batteries, in order to have that microgrid is a really beautiful thing. And I highly encourage it, because you have a lot of control over that environment. You're not going to have somebody knock over a power pole. You're not going to have somebody. So it's a very controlled environment, and because of that, there's a very low probability of having a major event, and therefore you don't need that generator shaft to help you ride through those events. So I fully support renewables in microgrid situations and in island situations. I think it's very wise.
I mean, because we keep talking the island because we're here, but just think of individual locations in Alaska or the woods in Utah or Colorado and stuff like that. I can see that being a major necessity. Also there, especially even with in my family, we have a house in the middle of nowhere in Fairfield, Texas, and we haven't always been on the grid growing up.
Yeah.
Now we are, and we are able to have electricity out there now, but it hasn't always been the case.
Right.
So I totally understand that. Now, let's kind of, if you had a young man or a young lady who was interested in going into electrical engineering, what kind of things would you want them to know beforehand? Because if they just said, "Well, I want to be an engineer," what kind? Let's start there. A kid comes to you and say, "Oh, I hear you're an engineer. I want to be an engineer."
Yeah.
What's one of the things that you would say to them?
Oh man, that's a that's a great question. Um, I would I, I would do whatever I could to inspire them to keep going down that path. It's a lot of hard work, but it's also intensely rewarding.
Mm-hmm.
It's you you to me, engineering, and this applies to many fields, but to me engineering is a skill set to create. It
Yes.
gives you the tools to create, and that creation can be used to benefit everyone around you.
Mm-hmm.
And so the advice that I would give them would be, don't ever give up. You're going to hit some rough patches where, or maybe some of your classes are really difficult, or maybe you think that, oh, I can't really do this, or maybe I'm not cut out for this. Well, you are. All you need really is the desire and the
Well, it was something that you talked about yesterday when I asked you this question here
yeah,
in the living room, and you started talking about how many things rely on engineering.
yeah.
If they wanted to work on cars,
Oh,
you
yes.
remember that yesterday?
I do,
And,
yeah. So that is actually something that I would do as well. As I would ask them, what aspect of engineering are you interested in? Because there's many different, even in the electrical field, there are
yeah,
many different specialties that you could really focus on, and so I would ask them questions. What are you interested in? What do you want to do? What do you want to be a part of? And help them realize what part of electrical engineering they might be wanting to go into. If
yeah,
it was power, if it was microelectronics, if it was creating the silicon wafers that go in
Yeah.
the the microprocessor chips, or if it was circuit board design or custom electronics, microelectronics, or if it was fiber optics or uh, antenna theory and antennas. You know, if do you want to build the antennas on an F-35, or do you want to build the computer of a car, or if they're interested in mechanical engineering, reach out to some of my mechanical engineering friends to help them create connections and have those conversations.
And you that last comment you just said was powerful. Is connecting with someone in the field that you're looking at
Yeah.
to get an idea of what that field entails. Because I have parents all the time. I have people all the time. I have kids all the time that says, "Oh, I'm interested in STEM." Okay, what part of STEM are you interested in? Are you interested in the science part, or the math part, or the engineering part? And they'll say, "Well, I'm interested in engineering." Okay, what facet of engineering? And you have to bring that down and bring that down,
Yeah.
because STEM is huge, and I mean huge.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't understand that. It's huge. And you have the white collar STEM, you have the blue collar STEM, and you have to think about that. And when you talk about electrical engineering, you're not only talking about being able to wire a house, you're also talking about being able to put together the electric circuitry for a 747, or a submarine, or a battle cruiser. If y'all don't know what that is, that's a big ship. Uh, or any of those things. Or I ain't trying to be funny. Have you noticed how thin phones have gotten?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, and that has a lot to do with electrical engineers working with mechanical engineers to try and shrink everything as small as they can.
Because
Yeah.
I remember the first phone I got, I called it a brick. It was in a bag, and it reminded me of the field phones I used in the military. And all you could do was make phone calls with it.
Yeah.
Now, think, if you have a smartphone, you don't need a GPS.
Yeah.
You don't need the yellow pages to look up something.
Hmm.
You don't need a dictionary. All these things you no longer need, because you have it in the palm of your hand. And it's electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, architectural engineers all working together to do this.
Yeah. And one additional thought that I have to add on to all of that is don't ever be afraid to ask somebody.
Oh yeah.
Because we are, like, any engineer in the field is probably really excited about what they do, and they would love to share what they do. Like, I know of somebody from a high school contacted me and like, "Hey, I'd love to learn what you do." I would be overjoyed. I'd be like, "Yes, please let me share." You know,
Don't tell me that, because I'm doing STEM this year. I'll be dragging you into my classroom. I don't have a problem with that.
it
Paul
would,
will tell you, I'm not Shane.
and I don't think it's just me. I think it's probably almost the vast majority of all professional engineers out there would love to share and inspire, uh, the rising generation to share their dreams and their passions.
Yeah, and kids need to know about it. Well, not only kids, you have a lot of people who are changing their careers
Mm.
in going into other careers, and to have an idea of, oh, maybe I want to be, I started going to college years ago. Life got in the way. Now I have the time. Now I have the resources. What has changed in this field that I need to know about?
Mm.
So it's not only uh, young men and women, it's also people who are having, career changes. And
Yeah.
there's going to be a whole lot of career changes when this whole thing is over.
Yeah.
But That's okay. It can
Yeah.
be. Not that
Yeah,
big of a deal.
exactly. It just the desire to learn, you know. If you
Mhm.
want to know, go for it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Come join the community.
Yes, come join the community. And yes, he has been on this whole time listening to the show. So I'm glad to see that he was on. That's your friend.
Yeah.
That's another person I feed here on the island.
Yep.
But we've got a few minutes left, and um, I want you to kind of give me a little insight into what you would want to do with, within your career field
Mm.
or in the future
What do I want to do inside of my career field?
or
I
outside of your field.
I I want to leave behind beautiful things
Mm-hmm.
for my posterity and for everyone. I am inspired by beautiful architecture,
Mm-hmm.
and I am inspired. I want to build a world that's better for that's just I I want, and I also want to go back to Africa and help, my brothers and sisters out there with their
Yeah.
struggles. Like, I really respect Engineers Without Borders, trying to bring electricity to people who don't have the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've really thought about that, and so right now I've been trying to gain the skills necessary so that maybe later in my career I can go and serve and just a better bring electricity to people. It's
Mm-hmm.
changed my
Mm-hmm.
life for the
Mm-hmm.
better. Electricity brings people together. We right now, this is electricity plays a massive role in this conversation,
Oh yeah.
and to be able to create and to build and to inspire and to bring people together
See,
is
that's part of that missionary aspect of you. You have seen a need, you have dealt with a need, you have lived within a need, and just to kind of make sure people are on a even playing field
yeah.
is one of those things um, that you embed, that you follow, that you love, that's in your heart.
Mhm.
And I love the fact that you talked about not giving up, because you know how many students in STEM fields stop after they take their first semester of classes in that field
Yeah.
because it's hard.
Yeah, I burned out. I honestly burned out my junior year. I
Hmm.
I almost switched my major, and I burned out my junior year because it was so hard. And one thing that really got me through was reading the biography of Einstein. His journey inspired me to keep going. Uh,
Hmm.
and so, if to any of your listeners or anyone part of this community who might struggle or is going through a difficult time, I would really encourage you to go seek out other people who are in that field. Listen to their stories because you're not alone. It is
Hmm.
hard. The ability to create and you have to absorb so much information, and it can be difficult, but don't give up. Don't give up. We're all human, and we're all in this together. I have honestly found that engineering is intensely collaborative, and
Yes.
other people's strengths will be your weaknesses. And if you work together as a team, you can come together in unity and solve difficult, powerful problems to help
Yes.
people.
Yes, you can. And I love that because it was a comment on a earlier show. A young lady, Jennifer Sanchez, made a comment. She was going to school for microbiology, I think, and she said she had to find a community of people
Yeah.
that were in STEM that she could connect with.
Yeah.
And that was one of the great important things to her when she was in school. Now
Yeah.
we have about a minute left. Is there anybody you want to give a shout out to before we go?
I would honestly love to shout out to Yesse that you mentioned. He's been a great friend of mine out here and has helped me transition, and I'm really grateful for him. I want to shout out to my parents, uh, who really sacrificed, um, to help teach me, and turn mundane things into learning opportunities, and be creative. And I couldn't have gotten here without my friends and my family. It's it's a team effort, and I'm very grateful for everything that they've done for me.
Okay. Well, hey, John, you're still young. You're still learning. I'm a little bit older and I'm still learning. Hey, I want you to keep up the good work in your field, in other fields. I want you to, reach your vision
Thank you.
or, go for your vision and your mission and enjoy life, you
Thank
know.
you.
And if y'all don't remember when Yessie was on, ladies, he's single.
This is true.
I had to put that in there, y'all, because it's just for fun. But John, I want to thank you for coming on,
Thank you.
and Thanksgiving dinner's on me, so don't forget that. Paul, your head just turned.